chosen to be in this place. And I pray that you bless our hearts and our minds in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, chapter 23 and 24. So far, Job and his friends have been carrying on a yada, 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 well, yada, 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 yada. In chapter 23 and 24, Job stops talking to his buddies, and he's carrying on a conversation with the Lord because they're not listening to him anyway, so why should he keep talking to them? And so in verse 1, then Job answered and said, even today is my complaint bitter. My stroke is heavier than my groaning. Now, the message of the Bible is embedded in language. And I'm a King James Version preacher, teacher. That's all of my public ministry is KJV. But I do understand that the Bible was not written in 1611. Okay? We're aware of that. And so there are some terms that are translated in 1611 English that didn't make a whole lot of sense to the translators. And so the word my, for instance, that word came out of the translation, the hand of God. So let me read it like that. Even today is my complaint bitter. The hand of God is heavier than my groaning. That sounds like an odd statement, but what Job is telling me is, I cannot express to you how bad I'm hurting. God's hand on me is heavier than I'm able to complain about. I mean, he has collapsed in every area of his life, and he can't voice it. If you've ever been in a situation where you can't tell anybody how heartbroken you are, you can't voice it. There are just no words. And so, these guys have no clue how bad off he is. And for him to muster the strength to carry on chapter after chapter after chapter, it's like you going to visit somebody in the hospital and staying 5 hours. And they've just had surgery, and they're weak, and they're tired. But somehow, they muster the strength to listen to your stories and to answer your questions. And they don't complain about it. And so Job is to the point now he's going to complain about it. All right? And so verse number 3, oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his seat. Job can't seem to find God. Now, even though Job knows that God is omnipresent, there is no place where God, the fullness of God is not. It's not like his finger is in the Philippines, and then his thumb is in Guam, and his other hand is in Japan. That's not the omnipresence of God. The totality of God exists in every place. I don't understand that. The totality of me exists right here. This is all you're going to get, mister. This is all I am right here. But God, the totality of God is in every place. And Job believes that, but he can't find him. He's looking for him. He's got some questions to ask him. He thinks he's been done wrong. He wants an audience with the Lord. And he says, I wish that I could come to his seat. And the word seat means his house. Job doesn't know where God lives. He's looking for his address. I want to go up to his front door and knock on his door. I want to talk to him. I've got some questions. I have been a righteous man, and look at the stuff that is false. I need to know what's going on here. All right? Here's what he would do if he found God and he found his house. I would order my cause before him. And order means to state or to lay it out. I would get into his living room. I would get out my briefcase. I would lay all of my papers out in front of him. And he says my mouth would be full of arguments. I have a lot to say. Your mouth ever been full of words? You know? Job he's angry. Now he can't find God. And he's going to, in essence, say this. God's hiding. He knows he's done me wrong. And it's like your kids, when you did something wrong or they do something wrong now, and they don't want to face you. And so that's what Job is thinking here, okay? Now, not everything Job says or believes is theologically correct. We need to understand that. Job made some theological mistakes, all right? And one of them was, God's hiding from me. God's not hiding from him, okay? So anyway, let's go on. I would know the words which he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. I'm going to lay my case out. I know I've got all of these arguments that I need to bring, and I want to know what God has to say to me. That's pretty stout, isn't it? I'm just waiting to hear what he has to say, all right? Verse 6. Will he plead against me with his great power? And the word plead means oppose. Now, Job knows God is omnipotent, all right? He can do anything. He's all-powerful. And he says, will he just crush me if I did find him, and if I did sit down at the table with him, and if I did get my briefcase out and lay all of my papers out, would he just crush me with his omnipotence? He answers his own question. No, he wouldn't do that. But he would put strength in me. He would listen to me. This is the kind of God he is. He is omnipotent. He is all-powerful. He is everywhere. He would not crush me. He had the power. He's got the ability to do that, but God is not going to do that to me. And he's aware of the character of God, at least to that point. Now, verse number 7. There the righteous might dispute with him. Wherever he lives, whatever his address is, wherever his house is, that's the place where people go to get justice. The courts of men won't do it. You three guys sure haven't done it. And so I'm looking for somebody that's going to listen to me and give me a fair hearing, because it's certainly not here in the landfill with you guys. So, there the righteous might dispute with him. So should I be delivered or acquitted or exonerated forever from or by my judge. This is why you say, well, what is the big deal here? His name's at stake here, man. What if somebody lied out the yin-yang about you all over Hardy County? You're dealing drugs. You're being unfaithful to your spouse. You're stealing cars. What if all this was spread out around? Would you want your name vindicated and protected? You would want that. Well, this is where Job is right now. He's had some really nasty things said about him. We read about that last week. None of it's true. He wants it cleared up. All right? He wants his case dismissed. And so verse number 8, now he doesn't do this physically, but in his mind, Job's going to circle the globe, and he's looking for God. Now, where would you go? Where would you go to look for God? One of the prophets said, it's one of the minor prophets, said that God is from Teman. And Teman means nowhere. Where's he from? He's from nowhere. He's from everywhere, but he's from nowhere. All right, so verse number 8. I'll tell you this before we get into these next two verses. The biblical mind has east as the cardinal point of the compass, all right? East. So if you say he's on my left hand, what is east of, or what is left of east? North, all right? What is right of east? South, okay? So let's keep that in mind. He's going to go everywhere, and he's looking for God, and he's going to give God a piece of his mind. He's got this mouthful of arguments. He's got a briefcase full of papers, and he's going to just lay it out on him. So he says, behold, I go forward. That's east. But he's not there. And backward. That's west. But I can't perceive him. I can't understand him. He's not there either. On the left hand, well, that's north, where he doth work, but he's not at work. And where he is, I can't behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, which is south. I can't see him. What other points of the compass are there? He's covered them all. And in his mind, he thinks God has just fallen in a hole somewhere on purpose, and he's hiding from him. All right, verse number 10, he knoweth the way that I take. And that phrase, the way, means life principles. So God knows the principles of my life. He's watched me. He knows how I live. He knows the values that I hold. He's aware of that. All right, so he knows the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. This is how well God knows me. And so Job, can you see him kind of coming in and going out? Lighting up and getting dark, lighting up and getting dark. And so he's kind of been dark here for a few verses. You know, God's hiding from me. He's done me wrong. He knows he's done me wrong, and I can't find him. And he comes back in verse number, he says, when the Lord has tried me, and we've had this trial that I have been begging for, I'm going to come out of this in good shape. So he knows that God is a just God. My foot hath held his steps. My foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. Now, here is a question that I have. We're talking about a book that took place, the events of this book take place between Genesis 11 and 12. There is no written law. We're a long way from the law of Moses. We're a long way from Moses, period. How did Job know anything about what God expected of man? Where did he get his information from? Now, let me tell you some things that Job believed to be wrong. All right? He believed that murder was wrong. Where do you get that? He believed that lying, greed, adultery, injustice, lack of compassion. He believed that hypocrisy, oppression, and idolatry, he believed these things were wrong, and he's going to talk about that in chapter 24. Where did he get that value system from? The world. Moses hadn't even been born yet. That's what I'm saying. This is pre-law, Okay. Okay, we've got some men that have, there's some principles that God gave to Adam that have been passed on by word of mouth from generations. That's why it's so important for parents to teach their kids something beside how to throw a two-seam fastball and change a tire on their car. That's why we as parents and even grandparents, when you get to be a grandparent, but you don't have as much authority over your grandkids as you did your kids. You understand? They have parents. I realize that we have influence in their lives, but the parents that do not train their children to understand who God is and what he expects of their life, that family is doing culture and injustice. You see, eventually we're going to pay the price for a child that does not know what God's ways are. And so Job, he believes these things wrong, and he's going to give a list. Matter of fact, in chapter 24, he's going to tell us some things that are going on out in the suburbs. Some wrong stuff going on out in the suburbs. Then he's going to tell us some things that are going in the rural counties, out country, city. I mean, it doesn't matter where you live. Wrong stuff's going on. All right, so now look at verse number 12. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. And so he heard the commandment of God's lips somewhere, and it's from this passing down word of mouth, father teaching son, who teaches son, who teaches son. So he says, I've not gone back from the commandment of his lips. I have esteemed, and esteemed means to lay up like treasure. He said, I have laid these things up in my heart more than my necessary food. This stuff's more important to me than my daily bread. This is how I live my life. This is what I do. This is the definition of my character, is his commandment. Now, where is he? my life has been crushed. I've been ruined. I have followed his commandments. I want to know why. Can you kind of sympathize with that? You know? And he trusts God. And I know it's what I was saying at the beginning of the service. We've all asked this question. If you be honest, we've all asked this question, or these questions that he's going to ask here in just a few minutes. And so verse number 13. Now I know that God is a God of justice. I know that his word, I treasure it like I do my daily bread. But he is one mind. In other words, he is unaltered in his purpose. God wants to do what he wants to do, and you're not going to change it. All right? So he is one mind. And who can turn him? And what his soul desireth, even that he doeth. Apparently, because look what he's done to me. He wanted to do it or it wouldn't have happened. All right? Verse 14. For he performeth the thing that is appointed for me, and many such things are with him. In other words, my word, look at what's happened. What else is out there? If this has already happened, is he through? Is he finished with me yet? And when he thinks about that, he says in verse 15, therefore I am troubled at his presence. This scares me to death. What's still in the wings waiting for me? When I consider, I'm afraid of him. And the word afraid there means scared. He's scared of God because of what he thinks God has done to him. Now, question. Who has actually been the driving force and the agent behind all this tragedy? Satan has. Satan has. And so, but he's not aware of that. He thinks that the governance that God uses to govern the world has somehow just gone haywire. And chapter 24 is probably the low point of the book. Matter of fact, I just am going to tell you, chapter 24 is the bottom of the ditch for Job. All right? So, verse 16, God maketh my heart soft. That means to melt. He said, God has just melted my heart. I'm defenseless. The Almighty troubleth me. Let me ask us a question here. God ever troubled you? You know, this is not some little chubby bedtime person that we're dealing with here. This God can do anything. Pretty awesome to think. All right? Because I was not cut off before the darkness, neither hath he covered the darkness from me. He said, I haven't died, but I've been in darkness. And the idea is when you die, you know, you go to the grave and there's darkness there. He said, I've experienced that before I've even died. Well, a lot of people have. In fact, I would say that most people have experienced some level of darkness. And they're not dead yet. Now, let's get into chapter 24. He continues. Why, seeing times are not hidden from the Almighty, since God knows everything, do they not know him? Do they not know him, not see his days? So, here's the question. Since God knows everything, and since God can do anything, then why aren't the wicked dragged into court and prosecuted? I want to know. Now, you remember the worldview of his buddies? Universe is a moral place. It always blesses the good and curses. He said, I beg to differ now. I used to believe that. He said, I beg to differ now. He said, there's some wicked people that just, their kids are playing in the yard, and they got the radio going, and they're dancing, and they're partying, and they're jumping in the pool. And then here's a godly man over here can barely feed his family. His animals are scrawny. They're stealing his property. He said, there's a conundrum here that I cannot explain. I've got some questions. My mouth is full of these questions. So why is there not a timetable set up? Why isn't there a schedule somewhere hanging in the heavens saying God is in at 10 o'clock in the morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 10 to 5, and then, you know, why isn't there a schedule somewhere where I can read and find out where I can get some satisfaction. Now, here's some country crime, all right? We're in the rural district now. Verse 2. Some remove the landmarks. They violently take away flocks and feed thereof. All right, now these landmarks, for the most part, farmland was not marked off by fences or walls. It was too expensive. So if you owned property, you didn't have a fence, you put cornerstones on your property. And so let's say this auditorium is Nathan's property. So he'd have a cornerstone there and there and there and there. This is his property. He'd put his sheep in here, all right? And he would make sure that his sheep stayed in that area. Well, there are some rich people that are wanting to increase their property holdings. So they sneak in here one afternoon or night, and they take his cornerstones on the east side of the building, and they move them to the edge of these pews right here. Well, he's just lost about 20 feet of property, and whatever animal was feeding on this area right here now belongs to the thief. All right? So he says, some remove the landmark, they violently take away the flocks and feed thereof. It doesn't matter if you like it or not, they're going to take it. They drive away the ass of the fatherless. They take the widow's ox for a pledge. And so here's a kid that doesn't have a dad. There's no father in the home. Here's a widow who doesn't have a husband. She's got one donkey to plow her little rocky field, and he steals that. All right? They turn the needy out of the way. The poor of the earth hide themselves together. These people, they have their property stolen, they have their homes confiscated, and so they just get together. All these poor folks, these low-class folks just get together, and they just form a commune somewhere and live the best they can, all right? Verse number 5, behold, as wild asses in the desert go they forth to their work, rising betimes for a prey, the wilderness. You know, every now and then, old deer will walk by, and somebody hit him in the head with a rock, and they got a little something to eat. Every now and then, they get something to eat. The wilderness yieldeth food for them and for their children. Now, what kind of food is in the wilderness? Grass and bush leaves. I mean, these people were eating like animals because they'd been oppressed. All right? Someone had stolen their property and their animals. Verse number 6, they reap everyone his corn in the field, and they gather the vintage of the wicked. Now, some of them are basically slaves of the rich people. And so they work in the field of the rich guy. They pick his corn crop. They're not allowed to eat any of it. They have to turn every cob of the corn over to the rich guy. Verse number 6. They cause the naked to lodge without clothes. This is pretty incompassionate, is it not? These people are dirt poor. You've already stolen their property. You've stolen their animals. You have turned them out of their homes. You're not feeding them. They're doing your work, and you're not taking care of them. They have no covering for the cold. You took their blankets, so they're freezing to death. They're wet with the showers of the mountains. They don't have a house to live in. They're living in the rain. They're freezing to death in the rain. They embrace the rock, which means they hide and huddle under a ledge. You got a rock wall here, and you got a little bit of a ledge, and you got 20, 30 people huddled up under that ledge. No jackets, no blankets, nothing. They're all shivering together like a bunch of wild donkeys. They're wet with the showers of the mountains and embrace the rock for want of a shelter. They don't have anywhere else to go. They pluck the fatherless from the breast and take a pledge of the poor. My word. This guy has no heart. They take this baby this nursing baby away from its mother and hold it hostage until mom can pay her bill. Well, when's she going to be able to do that? Living under a rock, freezing to death in the rain, doesn't have any clothes, doesn't have any animals to plow with. They're being treated like dirt, all right? They cause him to go naked without clothing. They take away the sheaf from the hungry, which make oil within their walls and tread their wine presses and suffer thirst. You work for this guy, all right? He's robbed you, and you can't do anything about it. You don't have any money to fight him with. I mean, you're at his mercy. Now you're treading out his olive press, but he's not giving you any oil, nothing. Now, here's the question that I know probably all of us have asked. What kind of a God, and Job's asking the same thing, what kind of a God would let this go on unchecked? Unchecked. Now let me read you something. This was many thousands of years ago. Kind of hard to identify with this now. So let me update you. These are FBI statistics from 2017. In 2017, in the United States, there were an estimated 1,247,321 violent crimes. The estimated number of robbery offenses decreased 4%, and the estimated number of murder and non-negligent manslaughter offenses decreased 0.7% when compared with estimates from 2016. The estimated volume of aggravated assault and rape offenses increased 1% and 2.5% respectively. Nationwide, there were an estimated 7,694,086 property crimes. The estimated number for 2 of the 3 property crimes showed declines when compared with the previous year's estimates. Burglaries dropped a little bit. Collectively, victims of property crimes suffered losses estimated at $15.3 billion in 2017. The FBI estimated law enforcement agencies nationwide made 10.6 million arrests in 2017. The arrest rate for violent crime was 160.7 per 100,000 inhabitants. The arrest rate for property crime was 388.7 per 100,000 inhabitants. By violent crime offense, the arrest rate for murder and non-negligent manslaughter was 3.8 per 100,000 inhabitants. Rape, 7.2%. Robbery, 29.3%. Aggravated assault, 120. Of the property crime offenses, the arrest rate for burglary was 61.7 per 100,000 inhabitants. In 2017, 13,128 law enforcement agencies reported their staffing levels to the FBI. These agencies were reported, and it's got the number of agencies and officers. That's a bunch of crime. And we're told that a perfect God runs the universe. Now, a lot of crime wasn't even solved. How many murderers are running around and they will never get caught in this life? How many thieves will never get caught in this life? What do you think they're thinking? Got away with it. All right? This is the way human culture has always been. There's always been these people. And so this was the FBI report given by Job. This is the FBI report given in 2017. We're still doing the same stuff. And people are still asking, well, where's God in all that? Has anybody ever asked you that? Talking with a young man last week. His grandparents were murdered by his aunt. It hit the news. Y'all would know it if I told you the names, and it wasn't in this county. It's pretty incredible. Now, beginning of verse number 12, We hopped in our car, and we've left the country because the country is just crime-ridden. Well, wait till you come to town and see what's going to happen in town. Men groan, verse 12 says, from out of the city, and the soul of the wounded crieth out, yea, God layeth not folly to them. Explain that to me. You got people getting mugged and murdered, and God doesn't charge them with murder. Why? Pretty uncomfortable question that Job is asking here. All right, now verse number 13. They are of those that rebel against the light. They know not the ways thereof, nor abide in the paths thereof. They don't do the right thing. They don't live right. They don't talk right. They don't behave right. Now he's going to give us a list and tell us how they operate. Verse 14. The murderer rising with the light. That means before daybreak. So when's he going to do his dirty deeds? In the dark. All right? So he's going to kill you in the dark. So he rises with a light, killeth the poor and needy, and in the night is as a thief. So this guy's got his day planned out. He gets up in the morning before sun up, and he goes and kills somebody. Goes back home, and he hides in the light because he don't want anybody to see him. And then when the sun goes down that night, guess what he does? He goes out and he steals. He steals your property. He steals your animals. He steals your stuff. He steals your wife. He steals your kids. All right? Verse number 15. The eye also of the adulterer waiteth for twilight. Waiting for the sun to go down. He don't want to be seen. He wants to hide, saying, no eye shall see me, and disguiseth his face. He don't want it to be known as a guy that's running around on his wife or somebody else's wife, and so he wears a hoodie, puts a mask, and they don't want anybody to see him. In the dark, they dig through houses. Now, these houses were made out of brick and mud, and so they would just punch a hole in the wall, which they had marked for themselves in the daytime. Now, what does that mean? They were casing the joint out. They were walking through your neighborhood, and they were looking at your house and thinking, I think that back corner would be the best place to go in, so they mark it. And then when the sun goes down, they come, and they break into your house. They know not the light. They don't do this in the daytime. They'll slip around at night. For the morning is to them as the shadow of death. Well, you bet it is. Hey, let's go kill somebody. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. Man, I'm not going out there right now. Somebody will see me. And so the light is like the shadow of death to them. If one know them, they're in the terrors of the shadow of death. He is swift as the waters. Their portion is cursed. Now he's kind of on the other side of the coin here. He's told us how they operate. They operate at night. They're sneaky. They case the neighborhood in the daytime. And then he gets now down into verse number 18. Their portion is cursed in the earth. He beholdeth not the way of the vineyards. And vineyards there is it's a symbol of the good life. This guy doesn't know the good life. He's a punk. He's a gangster. He's a thief. And he just has, there's nothing good in him at all. And he's swift as waters, which means he lives life like a leaf in a river, He does not slow down long enough to enjoy family, to enjoy the wonderful times of life. He's going from one bend of the river to the other as fast as he can, going from one neighborhood to the other, fast, like a bunch of gang members. We've got them here in Hardy County. They'll go to a gas station and they'll put a scanner. How can you do that with all the cameras? You got to unscrew something, right? You got to take that gas pump apart to put that card scanner. I don't see how they get away with that. And they plan this stuff. It's pretty amazing how ingenious these people are. And they do it normally at night, okay? Now, things have changed a little bit because they didn't have lights in Job's day. We got lights everywhere now, in parking lots, and so it's a little different. So, drought and heat consume the snow waters. Now, what does heat do to water? Evaporates it, right? Dries it up. And so they're like that. So doth the grave those which have sinned. And so again, Job, he's aware that the grave will evaporate their life one day. And this is Job's only hope right now, that one day all of these criminals that he has talked about, they're going to be judged. They're going to be judged. But now he used to think they were always, always, always judged in life, and they died early. That was his worldview, just like his buddies hadn't changed their mind yet. But now, Job has given ample evidence that's not true. I mean, look at the people who, just vile, wicked people. And they've lived these long lives. And people just, the Robin Hood. Robin Hood was a thief. So, he gave it to the poor. He was a thief. He was a thief. I don't care what he did with it. And so, here, we've got these folks that, El Chapo? The guy, I don't know how many people he's murdered. Look at the number of kids that he's got hooked on drugs, that have murdered to make money. I mean, it's just on, and he's still living. Guy's in jail, but still alive. So, verse number 19 says, one day, now we're all going to die, okay? There's no differentiation here. Every human being is going to die, but your death is going to be different than the death of these guys. The womb shall forget him. It's like, Mom, no, I don't even know who he is. I've heard parents say that, but I don't even know who he is anymore. That's not my son. That's not my daughter. Something's happened to him in life, and so the womb shall forget him. The worm shall feed sweetly on him. Well, there's some vengeance for you right there. He shall be no more remembered, and wickedness shall be broken as a tree. And Job is telling me, Jim, don't worry about the prosperity of the wicked. Was it David that said, it bothered me. The prosperity of the wicked bothered me until I went into the house of the Lord. Then understood I their end. Then. And it was when he got exposed to the Word. Now, folks, that's why what we do, that's why what Bible preaching churches do is so important. It gives you a proper perspective of life. There are probably people sitting in churches all over the country tonight wishing that they had a way to break into a bank and steal a bunch of money. It would just help them pay some bills. But when you go to the house of the Lord, and I realize he didn't go to church, that wasn't the thing, but you have an opportunity, and I have an opportunity to expose my heart to the full extent of God's revelation. So we have the New Testament, we have the Old Testament, we have it all blended together into this two separate volumes of a wonderful book that has God's mind in it. And now I know what happens to the wicked, and you do too. You do too. But still, does it bother you? If you were God, what would you do tonight? What would be the first thing you would do if you were God? Anybody just want to say it out loud? Who? I mean, and anything you did would be right, because anything God does is right. Now, let me ask you a very uncomfortable question. Would you kill anybody? If it was right. If God killed somebody, is it right? Has God ever killed anybody? Yes, sir. He certainly, was it the right thing to do? Yes, sir. Did he ever kill a father and leave a child without a dad? Yes. Did he ever leave a mother without a son? Or a wife without a husband? Yes, he did. And it was the right thing to do. That was because anything God does is right. And we've got to come to the point where we can make that statement and that be the foundation of our life. Whatever God does is right. But I've got to make sure that this is what God has done. Job is mistaken. All right? Yes, sir. He comes into my mind all the time when I'm studying the book. How old is he? Like 109 now or something like that? A gazillionaire, and that man has caused more trouble around this world than any one guy I know of. And he's behind a lot of the turmoil in the United States right now. You know, just pretty incredible. A lot of his money goes a lot of places. All right? Uncomfortable question. Would you kill him if you were God? Would you let him go? He is, yeah. And yes. But that's how they get saved. Right. Right. The thing is that God's not going to, He might put someone, but they're not really accountable to Him as far as their life and what they portray to be. And I think a lot of reasons that's why they're allowed to go and do what they want to do and be the way they want to be, and nothing happens to them. Can I tell you this? They actually are accountable to Him. Now, they won't acknowledge it. They won't acknowledge it. Amen. Yeah. But they will never acknowledge their accountability. Right. And so you don't break God's laws. I heard people say, well, he broke the law. You don't break God's law. You break yourself on it, but you will never break God's laws. All right? Now, I know that's kind of an embarrassing question. Who would you take out? Who would you create problems for? That's an impossible question to answer because we're not God, you know. So it hasn't happened yet, so apparently that's not His will. You know, George Soros is still alive. That's God's will that George Soros is still alive. Yeah, I know. Yeah, all right. Verse 21. He evil entreateth the barren that beareth not, and doeth not good to the widow. This is the evil guy, the wicked guy. He draweth also the mighty with his power. He riseth up. No man is sure of life. Though it be given him to be in safety, whereon he resteth, yet his eyes are upon their way. They're exalted for a little while. Okay, I'll give you that. They come up on the stage of life and you know, they build a nice fortune and they steal and rob. They do all this stuff, and just for a little while they're exalted. But then they're gone and brought low. Everybody. If George Soros doesn't get saved, George Soros is going to go to hell, just like any other vile, wicked human being. His money will do him no good in the grave. None. None. Explain that. How, yeah, if we're assuming that some people are saved. They're exalted for a little while, and then they're gone. And cut off as the tops of the ears of corn. And if it be not so now, if I'm not telling you the truth, who will make me a liar and make my speech nothing worth? If I'm not telling you the truth about this, which one of you three guys is going to prove me wrong? He's challenging them. Now here's my case. Here's the case. We've got crime in the country. We've got crime in the city. We got wickedness out yonder in the hills, and we've got crime and wickedness in Beverly Hills. It's pandemic. It's everywhere. And he's given examples. He's given proof. The wicked don't always die young. Those that are righteous don't always live long, trouble-free lives. That just doesn't happen, guys. Now, prove me wrong. And, well, next week we'll get into 25. You'll notice how short. You notice that? He's got 6 verses to say, and then that's it. He's pretty much going to clam up. But I know when this study may just be kind of like a cloud over you. I hope it's not. I hope that we can see through. These men were wrong about a lot of stuff. You know there are lies in the Bible. They're accurately recorded. What did Satan tell Eve? You're not going to die? That's a lie. It's in the Bible, but it was accurately recorded. And so when we talk about the Bible being inspired, it means that whatever's in the Bible was perfectly, precisely, accurately recorded by the Spirit of God. Now, it might not have been a good thing, but it was David committed adultery. It is accurately narrated in the Scripture. And so I know when we're going through this, we're like, man, when's all this going to change? It will. Y'all know that well as I do. I'm preaching to the choir here. This is going to come to an end. And every person who has never accepted Christ as their Savior, they're going to stand before God, and they're going to wish they had at some point. Yes, sir.
Psalm 37 says, "Weep like a great bay tree." Said, but then look around and said, where'd he go?
So I don't know how much longer we have to live on this earth, but the time that we have, let's honor God with our lives. Let's let the world see. Here's what happens. When you have tragedy hit your life, you love God. You love the Lord. You honor Him. When you have blessing, you love the Lord. When you're crushed, you love the Lord. When you're exalted, you love the Lord. So there's a commonality, and that is this: love the Lord. Honor God. You don't let your circumstances determine the level of your worship. So Jesus is in everybody's future, not just those that believe in Him. He is in everybody's future. And so, yes, sir.
TJ's teaching on Sunday morning class back there, how to thrive in Babylon.
How to thrive in Babylon. They're not the enemy. Right. They're not the enemy. Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Thank you all for being here tonight. God bless you. And see you Sunday morning.